Okay, we're going to do some more WireShark, and I'm calling this a quick tour, but we're going to look at some of the potentials of WireShark and how you can jump in and get to know the tool. Like I said, this is completely valuable if you're going to be in really anything in networking. If you're going to do troubleshooting on networks, or if you're going to do forensic packet analysis for intrusions and things like that. If you're good at WireShark, you're going to be much better at your job. So I have WireShark up here, but if you don't have it, here it is. So it's wireshark.org. You go to the download page, and as you can see, you can get it for Windows or Mac. And anyway, I highly suggest you go and get that. I am going to, the WireShark generator, as you learned from your labs, the WireShark generates PCAP files, and so I'm going to put the PCAP file that I'm using here on Blackboard, so that if you want to go back and follow along. So anyway, I have WireShark opened up, and as you can see, I've got a lot of interfaces that I can capture on here. I am not going to do a capture. I'm going to open up a file, and here we go. So let me do the setup for this file. Basically, I rebooted my machine. I opened up one Chrome browser window with a single tab. I then went to CNN.com. As soon as the page looked like it was completely, that I'd seen the entire page was there, I then stopped the packet capture. So you are seeing this packet capture from the time that, as soon as I could get WireShark fired up and the browser set up, and then hit record. And as you can see, in that short of a time period, I have 7,895 frames. And so your PC is just sitting there, apparently doing nothing on the network. There is a lot going on. And you can learn a lot, actually, by just going through and looking for things, right? So, let's see. Pick something that is okay. So here, WireShark shows you the protocol that it has decoded. It has protocol decoders. These are almost always right. However, it can misinterpret if somebody's trying to like break in and they're using the wrong. They're faking out the port. Then sometimes you have to go in there and build your own decoder. But here, NBNS, and so you kind of go, what is NBNS? And so if we go to Google and we search for NBNS, ends up that is the NetBIOS name services. And why is that going? Who knows? We're not going to go into that, but this would be a point that you could start investigating what NetBIOS name services are, what they might be doing on your network, and using WireShark as a way to slowly get familiar with other protocols. Protocols LMR, for example, LLMR, things that you're not familiar with. So anyway, so yeah, just fire it up on your machine, capture a little bit, and start poking around and start learning. I did go over how in the details frame how the different pull downs here are basically coincide with the OSI model. I did that in my other video, so I'm not going to go through that. Let's see, is there anything? Oh, okay, so one thing that's sort of interesting, I guess, from a security perspective is we see these ARPs. And we can just look at ARPs by going up into the display filter and type in ARP, and it will filter for only ARP packets. And we see a lot of them. I did want to take that off, though. We see a lot of them, and you can see they're all FFs, which means it's an ARP broadcast, right? You remember that from networking. But if we look over here at the info, so it is who has 66.119.1.72 tells 66.119.65. And so we know that this IP address is a active IP address on the network. And now here we have 67 asking for 65. We have 101 is active, 65 is active, and here we have an RFC address, a 172 address, couple of them. So there is and if you look up 66.119, that's a globally routable address. And so we've got routable addresses on there. We've got some private addresses on there. We could probably, even just by looking at the density, tell if who the default gateway is, because probably for the most part people are going to be ARPing for default gateways. That's probably going to be a router, and just by looking at the ARPs, and so we haven't even, and we're going to have a video on how you actually capture traffic that you want to capture, because your sniffer has to be in between the source and the destination of the traffic. I'm just hooked off the side of the switch at this point, and so I can't really get into what would be considered privileged traffic, but I can still see the broadcast, and the broadcast is starting to tell me a lot about what's going on with this network. So anyway, if somebody has gotten to the point where they can at least have a switch port, they can start looking through the network and getting an idea of the topography of it. So anyway, like I said, I mean, this is what, this has got a huge number of frames. It's pretty intimidating, and so what can we do to kind of start figuring out what's going on? Well, a couple things we can do at the beginning. In statistics, we can do conversation. Well, let's go to endpoints first. And this is the number of unique IP addresses during that one short capture. Now, if you remember, I'm on the network. I just rebooted my machine, and I went to CNN, and that's all I did. And I have this huge number of unique IP addresses. So obviously, more is going on than simply going to a website. Up on the tabs here, we can sort it by v4, v6, TCP, UDP. So we have the pure Ethernet frames. We have v4. We have v6, which is sort of interesting. It just so happens that I have v6 connectivity, so and then TCP, of course, which is going to be the majority of them, and UDP. And so anyway, so it's like, okay, so we got a lot going on here, but we're not really nailing anything down. We can also go to statistics and look at conversations, and it's a little bit, but it's really not better. So it looks like there's a lot of independent conversations going on, which is a connection from one point to another and an exchange of one or more packets, and they just about correspond to the endpoint. So so my web browser is going out and touching a lot of places on the internet, and you can go through and you can find. See, I'm 1.68 is actually my machine, which becomes pretty obvious here when you look at the destination and response, and so this is my machine reaching out to all of these addresses. And if you look through, all of these are pretty much, all of these really are routable addresses on the internet. So my machine is going out and talking to a lot of people. So you can do things. So the filter is your friend. You can use it to, as we did this in the lab, but IP address. And it's bringing up, I've done some searches on this before, so it's bringing up the searches that I had done. But you can see that the bar turns green. If I advance it and take that R off, it turns color and says, this is not really legal. So as soon as it starts becoming legal, it turns green again. So double equals is an equal sign. So I say, show me all the frames that have an IP address of 1.68, and we lose some of the packets, you can see that we're losing some in the numerical sequence here, but if we look, there is a we have a lot of TCP handshakes setting up here. We have AX, SYNAX, AX, client hello. So we have a connection to websites. You can see it's a TLS v1.2, and so we're SSL or TLS, or HTTPS, I guess, going on in between us and websites, which is pretty common anymore. It makes it hard if you're trying to figure out what's going on inside the packet, of course, because it's encrypted. But so I can also filter. This is something like the endpoint conversation, only it basically brings it down to an individual conversation. So if we do and IP adder equals 151.10 1.1.67, and we see the conversation going on between these two IP addresses. So we see TCP handshake, we see a GET, and we're going to get into this also on the security video. We're going to talk about actual protocols and how important protocols are, but we essentially issued a GET to a website. We got an ACK. Then we got a response saying that website had moved permanently. And actually what I did is I typed in cnn.com, and they redirected me to www.cnn.com. And so anyway, but we're not going to talk about that. I guess I'm just bringing that up because I saw it. But so now I've essentially narrowed things down to one conversation. If I go to frame 122 here, this is so here we have the handshake, and this looks like this is the beginning of let's see, the beginning of the conversation. And so I can click on that, and I can say follow, and say TCP stream. And essentially that then brings up, when TCP makes a connection, it assigns a stream number, and that's how it uses what it uses to keep track of what's going on. And so I applied that as a filter. And as you can see, that it says TCP stream equals 23. Let me go here and let's go down to TCP, and you can see here the stream index is equal to 23. So you effectively, rather than doing follow, you could have opened up or expanded TCP, gone down, found the stream index, and set up your own filter. But follow is much easier and much faster. You can see there's a couple options there too. You can follow TCP, you can follow HTTP. And this screen kind of takes the bottom screen and gives you more of a holistic look, a running total. So we have response, so it's both sides of the conversation. It's that goes out and that goes in. So here the redirect you can see is from a company called turnertlsmap.fastly.net, which is sort of interesting. And then in here we have this huge number of apparently domains. CNN.com, CNNMoneyStream.com, OutTurner.com, just sort of on and on and on and on. So we're starting to get some insight into what's going on. Evidently, we got redirected first of all to triple dub. CNN is Fastly. If you look up Fastly, it ends up that it is a content provider. So companies like CNN, rather than having a web server, they host it out to somebody like Fastly or Akamai, which is distributed all over the probably the world, and they use a special kind of DNS so that you pick the server that is closest to you, and then that server is the thing that is the content delivery server, and it serves all of your all of the web pages from that point on. All of the rest of this stuff is ads. It is ads and photos and tracking and things for your web experience. And this is, you know, how they ads follow you everywhere that you go. So if I take that filter off, and if I look, if I'm looking for something like a three-way handshake, which is just to see, what a three-way handshake is. I know that there's one on 94, so I can do Control G, which is a search, and then go to 94, go to frame 94, and here I am. And so if we go to the TCP window here, and okay, and I jumped ahead a little bit, like, I see things and I jump ahead here. So this was really just showing the stream index equals to 20, and that's when you follow a TCP stream. So another way, I did this once, but there's other ways that you can do the filters. If I start out, so I started that out wrong, and so it didn't like it. So what am I trying to do? So I can also say IP adder equals 66.119.1.68 and so it was a little confused when I did that, but when I finished out the filter, it liked it. So I'm doing two things differently here. I'm using the and instead of the double ampersands, and I'm using EQ rather than the double equal sign. So you can do it either way. When I look at stream 20, I see that we have the handshake. I see we have the single get, the response, and then the finish up of the TCP connection. So by just looking at this part of the stream, this is the entire conversation. I connected. I went to I did a get from the wrong address or the wrong domain. I got a response and a TCP ACK, and then I got the response saying move permanently and telling you to go to www.cnn.com. And that's the end of that one conversation. I mean, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, a dozen frames, and that's why we saw so many source and destination streams on there. So anyway, we also very simply could have gone to 95, right click, follow TCP stream. We can see the two HTTP, the request and the response here. Makes it very easy to see it. But then we also see that full session because TCP is connection-oriented protocol. So a few other things that you can do here. Since I know I sent things to CNN, I can just say TCP contains CNN, and I am seeing every frame where the TCP portion had CNN in it. You can also do Control F. Let's see. Now I'm still within that to remove that filter. You can do Control F, and you can do a search. And you say, okay, well, it's pink. Well, that's because I have a display filter. I can say look for a string, and for all of you Unix guys, we can do regular expressions, which is pretty cool. So I say, oh, look for the string CNN, and I get a lot more frames because now this is looking for CNN anywhere in any part of the frame. So so cancel that. And so other things you can do, you can search for protocols. There's a hard way to do it. TCP port equals 80, and we have all of the HTTP protocols. The problem there is it only has the TCP 80 ports. We also have 443, so we also maybe need to search on that, and we can see that that's really where the majority of things are taking place. So we have a lot of encrypted things are. So so we can also just say HTTP, and this gives, you know, this is the have a filter in there. Let's see, there was one more thing I want to show. Oh yeah, I know. These little arrows here indicate a conversation, and they're almost always like next to each other. But sometimes, especially if you're setting out DNS responses or DNS queries, you see a lot of them there. Which actually, I probably, let's filter for DNS. Once again, this will tell us a lot of what's going on, especially since if we look at how many DNS requests there are. There are a huge number of DNS requests. These pointer records are probably not, those are other things going on the network. Springnet.net. But here is the beginning of CNN. And pretty much everything after this is optimize. We have more CNN, Chartbeat, Amazon ADSys, Rubicon Project. I mean, it's pretty obvious by just looking at the domain names here that we're looking for, that these are going out to people that are charting us, that are trying to decide what kind of Bleacher Report. That's there's an image, because that's an image that they're pulling up from another site. But anyway, so these are all going on as your page is starting to come up, which brings up a really good point, and that is if you got slow response time on your network, look at your DNS. Make sure that your DNS is operating quickly, because every page is bringing up this huge number of requests. And if you've got slow DNS, there's a program, I believe it's Bencher, that you can do that will look for all the public DNSs from your particular network connection, and you can then set up your DNS rather than getting it from DHCP like you probably do. You can set up your DNS so that you have the optimal experience there. So another thing that so TCP analysis, you can see that TCP is a somewhat complicated protocol here by all of the potential that we have, but we can do an analysis retransmission, which is really common if things are going wrong with your network. Nothing's going wrong here. Don't have anything to show on that one. So anyway, so we looked at DNS. Well, let's do that one more time here. And go to frame 92. And if we look at, that is a query to CNN. So we look under DNS here, and it's a query, and we are asking for an address record for CNN.com. Okay, CNN responds with a oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So what's happening here? Didn't catch that. I have a DNS query going to 10.100.6.224, which is an internal DNS server. I also have a response or a request going on to 8.8.4.4, which you probably recognize as Google's secondary domain name server. And so when if you set up your own DNS, you can set up two, a primary and a secondary. So we're sending out the response to both of them. You can actually send out the response as many of these as you want, and then you'll always use whatever is the fastest to come back. But so anyway, so here is the, and in this case, the response that came back was actually from the Google backup server or secondary server, as opposed to my local one, which is sort of, obviously I need to do some tuning on there. But you can see the conversation here, right there. So there was the request to Google, and there's the response from Google, and we have our query again because it sends the query back, and then our response, and we get 4 responses. They're A records. They look remarkably similar, except the third octet is different, 1.129.65.193. And this gives you more things to explore, like, well, why does it send that many back? Which one would I use? Do I really know, and you can tell which one you're going to use, I guess, by looking at where you eventually go, which would give you some, as you're investigating this, that might be something that you would use to figure out how DNS works, for example. So anyway, CNN.com it's an A record, address record, and so I changed this at the beginning. Let me take the filter off here. I changed this at the beginning. So there is one thing that you can do here as far as how you see these fields, and that is the name resolution. If we go up into View and Name Resolution, first of all, we can look at physical addresses. We can turn that on. And all of a sudden now we see that we've got Brocade, we've got Hewlett-Packard, what else? More Brocade. So by doing that, it might help you identify the devices on your network, but also if you're a hacker, it starts giving you an idea of what kind of hardware is out there. And so anyway, that's the unique identifier in the MAC address that's telling you that. The other thing that we can do is view resolve network addresses. And it actually goes out and does queries to whatever is in your machine, whatever your recursive resolver, whatever your DNS is set up as, and it shows you the pointer records of them, or either the pointer or the reverse. And so sometimes you can figure out a lot of things. Like here, these are going to fastly.net, right? We saw that in the or when we brought up that TCP stream, but here we're getting a pretty fast idea of what's going on. And actually, I asked for the machine to be given any nondescript name, which is why it got any nondescript name. So Anyway, another filter that gives us an idea of what's going on in the network is just looking at open TCP ports that have responded with SYN and ACK. And this actually is a little bit of a kind of a passive network scan. So on the network, so. And this shows all the conversations that happened. Same thing as when we looked at TCP conversations on the analysis under statistics, but we have the resolution turned on so that we can actually see the names of the sites at each end if they're available. So once again, this really helps you get a little better of what's idea of what's going on as you're trying to analyze. Of course, we're worried about security. We're going to talk about how you use these same tools when you analyze a security incident. But when you're investigating either a network incident or a security incident, you saw just for that short window of time, you saw the huge number of frames that were that we captured. And imagine running this on a really busy network, a 1 gig or a 10 gig network for an extended period of time because you're trying to catch something. And well, first of all, if you do that, you need huge capture buffers, but your ability to also do the filtering becomes, pretty essential just to start sorting through. But this is really your first step, because a lot of times you will get some ideas of what's going on, and then as you know, when you start up WireShark, you can capture with you can use capture filters too, and that way then none of the the filters that you either don't specify or that you omit don't show up on your capture, and so it gives you a lot less devices to go through. So anyway, I believe that is it for that. Just a kind of a couple of things to play with. Like I said, the PCAP IPv4 to CNN.pcap.ng is sitting in the same folder as this. So thank you very much, and we'll do a security one here in a little bit.